Welcome back to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown, and on today's video, we are going to walk through every single round of the drafts, and I'm going to give you my player in each round to avoid, so you don't fall into these potholes in your upcoming drafts. Before we get to these 14 players we have to discuss, are you tired of draft day uncertainty? Here, I got to tell you about the Cheat Sheet Creator. It's your personal guide to perfect league-specific rankings. Visualize your path to victory as you add tiers and sync your league to craft custom rankings, ensuring every pick is strategic and tailored to your league settings. Enter your draft with confidence. Sync your league today at fantasypros.com/draftwizard or on the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app and use the Cheat Sheet Creator to dominate your draft. Let's get to these 14 players. All right, first round, we got to talk about Saquon Barkley. This was tough. This was a tough round to find a player that you should be avoiding, but I have questions about Saquon. Not the youngest running back in the league. I'm not saying he's ancient, he's old, but we did see some fall off for Saquon last year. Amongst 49 qualifying running backs, he was 25th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 23rd in yards after contact per attempt. While these are not terrible numbers, these are not the stellar numbers we have expected from Saquon Barkley in previous seasons. And look at the context of this offense. We think they could throw more with Kellen Moore this year. They're probably going to run a lot of plays. But what's the touchdown ceiling? Is Jalen Hurts going to steal goal line work? Also, what does the pass game involvement look like for Saquon? He's flanked by A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, extremely capable and talented pass catchers in their own right. And we know a lot of times when Jalen Hurts has the option of, well, either checking it down or taking off running, Jalen Hurts is going to take off running. So Saquon, it's a question of ceiling. And if we're talking about players in the first round, where we're talking about, okay, who could be the RB1 overall, the RB3, the top 5 running back from this year's fantasy drafts, I have a hard time seeing that Saquon Barkley pays off at his current ADP. Okay, next player we got to talk about in the second round, Davante Adams. And again, this comes down to I don't hate the player, I hate the ADP. Davante Adams, we have to discuss, last year was second in raw target volume, second in target share amongst all wide receivers. Do we think that volume grows with now Luke Getsy in town? We know Antonio Pierce wants to run the ball, and he's the wide receiver 10 in ADP right now. He didn't even pay that off last year. He's the wide receiver 15 in fantasy points per game. So what are we gravitating to for Davante Adams? What, maybe he gets traded away from the Raiders? It is a tough ask to press the button on Davante Adams in the second round, despite the fact that, yes, he is still one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. But quarterback problems, the situation around him, too many questions, and I worry about the ceiling for Davante Adams. Avoid him in the second round of drafts. All right, now we're into the third round, and a guy that I've discussed on previous videos, and I'm going to talk about him again here, Rachaad White. And this comes down to, I think Bucky Irving factors into this backfield, as well as what do we see for Rachaad White last year. Amongst 49 qualifying running backs, he was outside the top 39 in missed tackles forced per attempt, explosive run rate, and yards after contact per attempt. So if the volume takes a hit with Irving factoring into the backfield, then do we think that Rachaad White can make the most out of his touches? Maybe in the pass game, but not in the early downs. And what do we see in the context of this offense? Is this offensive line going to be just blowing up holes for him and giving him a ton of running room? They didn't do it last year. Few upgrades on the offensive line in the offseason, but still, this is probably a bottom 5, bottom 10 unit. They're going to have to throw the ball, and yes, Rachaad White's going to get target volume, but if he does not end up with a top 5 clip as far as snap share, weighted opportunity, all these different things where he is just soaking up the volume like a sponge, Rachaad White could disappoint this year. I'm going to avoid him in the third round. All right, heading to the fourth round of drafts. The guy I got to talk about here is Stefon Diggs. And the question that we're all trying to answer, and none of us can conclusively answer this, is what does Stefon Diggs have left in the tank? We can talk about the motivation. We can talk about, okay, CJ Stroud is him and all these different narratives. But what did we see on the field last year, weeks 10 through 18? Stefon Diggs was the wide receiver 45 or higher in weekly scoring only twice over that span. He only had one game with more than 80 receiving yards. In that span, he was the wide receiver 52 in fantasy points per game. And now arguably, can we say that he's entering a more talented depth chart? Yes, the quarterback play is still going to be really good, but Tank Dell, Nico Collins, who are immensely talented players in their own right, can they steal away enough volume from Stefon Diggs, even if he's still really good, to where he could pay off on his current ADP? Even if we want to dismiss the talent concerns and what he did last year, and even if you want to go the year before that of how these fades down the stretch have become problematic, does that cross over into the full season for Stefon Diggs? I can't answer that definitively. So that leads me to fade and avoid Stefon Diggs in the 4th round of fantasy drafts. All right, staying with wide receivers here, getting into the 5th round of fantasy drafts, the guy that I cannot press the button on is George Pickens. And this is simple. Arthur Smith is coordinating this offense, and we've seen what Arthur Smith does. In Atlanta, 2nd lowest neutral passing rate. Do we think that changes in Pittsburgh? We just saw the Steelers roll out one of the most run-heavy offenses in the league down the stretch last year. Do you think that changes this year? Still a talented defense, still good running backs in the backfield. You have 2 running quarterbacks. I don't know who's going to be starting at the time of recording this video, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. What out of all of this screams with Arthur Smith there that we see a true ceiling actualized for George Pickens? We can also make a case for the fact of just raw talent. Drake London and Kyle Pitts are as talented, if not more talented, than George Pickens. And I've made cases over the last few years where, okay, Kyle Pitts and Drake London are just that talented. They're going to overcome the situation around them, and then we saw it didn't happen. So do we think that George Pickens can overcome play calling, bad quarterback play? And this preseason, we got some concerns about the offensive line. You got 2 quarterbacks back there that love to hold the ball, and I don't know how much time they're going to have in the pocket. If the preseason blocking for this offensive line holds up, it could be rough. George Pickens, while you're paying a wide receiver 3 cost, where's the ceiling at? And what if he disappoints? What if he turns in a wide receiver 4 season? Or a low-end wide receiver 3 season? Where he's not a difference maker? Maybe sad you drafted him. So avoid George Pickens in the 5th round of drafts. All right, getting back on the running back train. We're entering the 6th round here. The guy that I've got to avoid is DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift, this is simple. Have we ever seen DeAndre Swift be a red zone monster? Do we think that that is his definitive role, considering we saw Chicago just turn over running backs, use a full-blown committee? And yes, I know. Everybody's watching this video. They're going to say, well, follow the money. Did that really help us last year for Miles Sanders? We followed the money into oblivion, into a dumpster fire. And I'm not saying that Chicago Bears, their offense is going to be a dumpster fire. Far from it. I think they're going to be very good. But I think they're going to live and die by the pass. And you're saying to yourself, yes, but isn't DeAndre Swift a really good pass catcher? Okay, that's fine. But he's still going to need touchdowns. And we still need efficiency and workload out of him. I can't definitively say that Khalil Herbert's not going to factor in this backfield. Or Roschon Johnson isn't going to factor into this backfield. Both in the red zone and in the early downs. And DeAndre Swift, look, if you're drafting him as a rock-solid RB2, he wasn't even that last year. You take out the 2 monster games in week 2 and week 3, he produced as the RB25 in fantasy points per game, averaging only 72.4 total yards per game. It's not a player that I want to be gravitating to. And again, we're talking about Swift moving from the Eagles offensive line to the Chicago Bears offensive line. A top 3, top 5 unit to middle of the road at best? Can't press the button on DeAndre Swift. Avoid him this year. Okay, heading into the 7th round, the guy that I got to discuss here is Dak Prescott. Yes, I know. He was amazing last year. Supreme value, was awesome. This all boils down into, what do we think the Dallas Cowboys offense is going to be this year? Yes, I know we're going to get a heaping dose of CeeDee Lamb, and that's great. And I know Dak Prescott, the passing rate was up and stuff. This offense is extremely thin. Do we feel good about the weapons that are coming out of the backfield? Offensive line has a few concerns, although I think they're going to be okay. Brandon Cooks, probably over the hill. Jalen Tolbert, looking more like a bust than a savior. Jake Ferguson is fine, but he's not a difference-making tight end. He's good for what he does, and he can beat zone coverage, but is he the player that's going to be, if you had to lean on him as the definitive 2 in this offense, the guy that's going to be a matchup nightmare and running alongside CeeDee Lamb, and these 2 pillars of the Dallas Cowboys passing attack are true difference makers? No. So with Dak Prescott, he's not running anymore. It's all from the pocket. The weapons after CeeDee Lamb, I'm sure if you want to throw in Jake Ferguson, after those 2 guys, it's questionable at best. If we see Dak Prescott not come back and be Superman and cape up and just carry the entire offense, which he's capable of, he proved it last year. If he doesn't do that this year, and he's not amazing, he's not superhuman, and he's just good or very good, is that going to equal a top 10 quarterback, top 8, top 12? He could be a high-end QB2, and this is no shade against Prescott, but that just could be the reality of this offense. There are too many other quarterback options in fantasy drafts for me to draft Dak Prescott where he goes. I can grab similar upside and just draft Trevor Lawrence later. Yeah, I've got to avoid Dak Prescott this year. All right, heading to the 8th round of fantasy drafts, the guy I got to discuss here, moving over, we're going to talk about the first tight end on this list, David Njoku. And you're going to say to yourself, man, but wasn't he amazing with Joe Flacco last year? Like a league winner. Sure. Is Joe Flacco still in Cleveland? As we cue up the Jeopardy music. No, he's not. You are relying on the arm talent of Deshaun Watson now. And all I can say is good luck with that. For David Njoku, when we saw Deshaun Watson in a full-time role, playing 5 games last year, David Njoku's numbers cratered. He had a 15% target share. He only produced 1.23 yards per route run, 35.2 receiving yards per game. He only drew 1 end zone target. So you're saying to yourself, okay, well, those maybe aren't that bad. He also, and again, if you want to boil this down to fantasy points, 8.5 fantasy points per game in PPR, that would have been good for the tight end 17 last year. Now you're talking about, okay, well, they added Jerry Jeudy. They got other pass game weapons in this offense. And do we think Deshaun Watson truly bounces back? If he doesn't, and we get David Njoku looking like a similar version of last year with Deshaun Watson under center, he's going to disappoint. He's not going to be a top 12 tight end because he didn't even produce like that last year. If you want to take the shot on, okay, one option out of this passing attack is bulletproof, and we want to say, okay, he's going to produce no matter what, fine, draft Amari Cooper, but it's not David Njoku. Okay, almost to the double digits, people. Let's keep motoring on. Round 9. Gotta talk about Jordan Addison. I'm not even going to bring up any of the off-field stuff. I'm not even going to talk about possible suspension or any of that because it's all speculation. We are just going to discuss what Jordan Addison did on the field last year. And you're going to say, yeah, but he was a wide receiver 30 in fantasy points per game. Pretty good, right? Okay, cool. I can get him as a wide receiver 3 or 4 from a team. That was all fueled by insane touchdown run out. Jordan Addison finished tied for the 4th most receiving touchdowns in the NFL last year. Tied with, and he was behind only Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, and CeeDee Lamb. Do you think that happens again in 2024? Sam Darnold as the quarterback? Okay, now we're on the same page. You're saying to yourself, no, that probably doesn't happen. Okay, well, what about he's going to draw targets at a high rate? Okay, we got to believe in Jordan Addison. Okay, let's talk about his target drawing ability. Amongst 81 qualifying receivers last year, this is where Jordan Addison ranked. 46th in target share, 59th in targets per route run, 51st in yards per route run, and 58th in first downs per route run. None of those metrics are kind to Jordan Addison. So all you're doing by drafting him this year is buying into insane touchdown luck that he had last year. And unless that repeats, which that's a difficult bet to make, in 2024, he's going to disappoint on your squad. Avoid him in drafts. All right, people, we are into the double digits rounds. Give yourself a round of applause. We're getting there, people. We're getting there. Round 10. We have to avoid Gus Edwards. The Gus bus, there's no gas left in the tank. It's bone dry. The tires are flat. The axles are rusted. There is nothing pretty to see here for Gus Edwards. Yes, I know that he was an RB3 last year, all fueled by the 13 total touchdowns that he had. I don't think that's coming back in this iteration of the Chargers offense. Not this year, people. He's not going to draw targets. 2.8% target share last year. He was outside the top 35 running backs in basically every tackle breaking metric you can pull up. He's got competition in the backfield with J.K. Dobbins, depending on what you think about him at this point in his career, and Kamani Vidal. I cannot draft Gus Edwards. He has no pass game upside. You're legit hoping he's an RB3 who is basically a touchdown-dependent RB3. And I'm not drafting him considering there is no upside to be had by getting Gus Edwards. The upside you're chasing, we saw last year. And I'm sorry, I want to draft the best team for 2024, not 2023. I'm not drafting Gus Edwards this year. All right, well, Steelers fans, I'm sorry. Close your eyes, put your thumbs in your ears, and just hit fast forward on this video. I'm about to tell you another Steeler to avoid in drafts, and that's Pat Freiermuth. I'm not even going to tell you about the snaps that he's splitting in the preseason. Okay, because you could say, oh, well, it's just the preseason, Derek. What are you talking about? Okay, let's talk about his career numbers. In his career, Pat Freiermuth has drawn a 19.7% target per route run rate. Doesn't sound too bad. 1.42 yards per route run in his career. Again, doesn't sound that bad, right? Okay, if you take those career numbers and you stack that up against 60 qualifying tight ends last year, that would have ranked 27th and 24th. So yes, I know you're grabbing him as a tight end 2 in most of your drafts, but where is the ceiling? If he does end up splitting routes, which we've seen, again, harken back to Arthur Smith, we've seen Arthur Smith do some funky things with player usage. Are you telling me that you can definitively say that when they get in the red zone, they're going to throw the ball, much less throw the ball to Pat Freiermuth? If you think that's definitively going to happen, Kyle Pitts would probably like a word. Yeah, don't see it's going to happen. You're going to see a lot more Darnell Washington. You're going to see a lot more other players. Cordell Patterson might stop by and say hi. And if that happens, you're going to regret drafting Pat Freiermuth this year. All right, to the 12th round we go. And again, familiar offense. And I feel like I'm just kind of beating up on the AFC North at this point. But lots of really good defenses, and the offenses are a little bit questionable. We got to talk about Jerry Jeudy here. If you want to explain it away and say, well, he's never had good quarterback play, it's been this, it's been that, it's been this, it's been that, at what point are you just going to give up hope on Jerry Jeudy? Last year, the wide receiver 53 in expected fantasy points per game, produced as the wide receiver 55 in fantasy points per game last year. What was standing in his way last year? Cortland Sutton? Okay. Not an elite level target earner or just awesome wide receiver at this juncture of his career. So do you think that he's going to earn more targets than Amari Cooper in this offense? I already talked about David Njoku and the concerns about Deshaun Watson playing quarterback in this offense. Deshaun Watson was arguably and just honestly just straight up bad last year in a real life football standard. I know he was okay from a fantasy standpoint, but again, give that to the rushing, not so much his ability to throw the football, which is what we care about when we're talking about the pass catchers for the Cleveland Browns. I can't invest in the pass catchers for Cleveland this year outside of Amari Cooper, who again, we talked about, basically quarterback proof. He proved that last year. Jerry Jeudy has not proven that he can be quarterback proof, much less good at any juncture of his career to this point for in fantasy. So if you're hoping that he pays off at this late ADP, no, I'm not taking that swing. I will draft rookies. I will draft other players and better offenses. And I will avoid Jerry Jeudy. All right, now we dig into the AARP well of the wide receivers. We are going to talk about in round 13, Adam Thielan. And I know this is probably a layup, but look, we're getting into these later rounds, and I'm telling you players to definitively just cross off your list. Adam Thielen should be immediately on your do not draft list. And you're going to tell me, okay, well, he started out really good last year to begin the year, right? Okay, can he do that again this year? I'm not making a bet on that. Another year older, and we saw him fade terribly down the stretch last year. Weeks 9 through 18, he surpassed 80 receiving yards in only one game. Only totaled 1.29 yards per route run, which is replacement level at best, and 8.9 fantasy points per game. No. When you get to the later part of your draft, take shots on running backs that are handcuffs or guys that are one injury away. Take shots on rookies that are ambiguous situations. Yes, I'm staring at you, Javon Baker. In those situations, we can gravitate to those guys and maybe actualize ceilings if everything hits. I don't see that happening for Adam Thielen in 2024. All right, to the final player on this list, unfortunately, I've got to squash the hope. I am the boot, and Jahan Dotson is the bug. Dotson, do not draft him this year. I just don't have any hope for him. What have we seen in his NFL career outside of some touchdown luck? Amongst 81 qualifying wide receivers in each season, he's ranked 68th and 57th in target share. He's ranked 78th and 52nd in yards per route run. He's outside the top 60 wide receivers and other efficiency metrics we should care about. And now he is falling to a team where, I mean, at best, he's going to be behind A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, probably Saquon Barkley. So you're hoping for the 5th option on a Philadelphia Eagles offense? There's just not a path to immense upside here. Even if one of these players gets injured and you're going to say, okay, well, there's contingent upside. Maybe if one of them goes down, maybe Jahan Dotson in this awesome offense. Okay, but he's had a clear path in previous years to do things, and we still didn't even see that, whether it was from a target share earning potential or efficiency. So why is he going to do that now in Philly? I will buy into all the other parts of this offense outside of Saquon Barkley and outside of Jahan Dotson where they go in drafts because I believe in them. I can't draft those Eagles this year. Avoid Dotson in all your drafts. All right, everyone, that is the 14 players you need to be avoiding in your drafts. So everybody, I'm giving you one person for every single round of your drafts to cross off your lists, and let's make this easy. Use the cheat sheet creator, get doing drafts, get ready to mock, get ready for fantasy. It's all here, baby. Week 1 will be here before we know it. Get ready with Fantasy Pros, and I'll see you next time.